Iceland is known for having a high cost of living compared to other countries. This is no secret. We all know that it's expensive to come to Iceland, but the specific cost of living obviously depends on a lot of different factors like personal usage, where you're living in the country, and so many more things. You guys have been asking for a cost of living video for so long, so here it is. Today we're gonna be discussing all of the things that I spend money on living in Iceland. By the way, if you don't know me, my name is Jeannie. I moved to Iceland 8 years ago, and so I guess you could call me an expert on spending money in Iceland. Let's get into it. So the first thing and the biggest expense is going to be rent and utilities. I do believe that rent prices are expensive in Iceland. By the way, I'm saying rent because we rent, we do not own. So housing prices in Iceland are expensive in general. If you haven't seen one of my previous videos where I talk about that, go ahead and check that out, because of the factors of the building materials and everything like that. But for this video, I will be talking about my personal experience. I'm going to be giving some ranges that I have found online, but I'm also going to be talking about how much we pay because again, it's from my personal experience. So the housing prices, again, it totally varies based on where you are and how big the place is and the amenities that are included. If we're thinking about renting a 1-bedroom apartment in the city center, meaning you're downtown surrounded by all the things, probably between 200,000 to 300,000 Icelandic kroner. I firmly believe that you can find places that are much more expensive than that. There are some new construction places that are going up that are beautiful and have an incredible view. So I'm sure those are gonna be much higher, but again, on an average price, that's what I would say. If you're living outside of the city center, in the suburbs or the outskirts, then it can be a little bit lower. So between 150,000 to maybe still up to 300,000 Icelandic krona. In the countryside, it could be even less than that. But again, my experience, we live in just outside of the city center and our expense is 250,000 Icelandic kroner per month, which translates to about 2,200 US dollars at the time of this recording. Okay, utility costs. So obviously there's a lot of different things that fall into this category. Electricity, water and garbage, internet, TV, phone. So all of those vary and have a range depending on usage and how many people are in your household and everything like that. Again, these are ranges. Electricity average monthly cost is about 5,000 to 10,000 Icelandic krona, obviously bigger for larger spaces. Water and sewage, the average monthly cost is around 5,000 to 8,000 Icelandic krona. Internet and TV is variable as well, but the average price can range from 6,000 to 12,000 Icelandic krona. And finally, phone usage. I would say that most people have a mobile plan, and that is my experience. So the prices for that can range between 4,000 to 10,000 Icelandic krona. Again, with utilities, same thing. It depends on how many people are living in your house, your usage, where you're located, and all of those things. So keeping that in mind. Moving on to the next largest expense, and that is food and drink. I have spoken on this channel many times about the food prices in Iceland. So again, if you are interested in the breakdown of grocery shopping in Iceland or going to a restaurant, I have made videos on those topics. And so those are popping up in the corner. I'll link to those, definitely check those out so I can walk you through how much everything costs. But in general, heading to the grocery store on a weekly or monthly basis for your staples, your meats, seafood, milk products, all of those costs combined can be between 50 to 100,000 Icelandic krona per month. This is such a wide range because everyone's dietary preferences or requirements are different. And some people are very, very frugal with the way that they spend money on food, and some people are more frivolous. Personally, if we were to add up our monthly grocery expenses, I would say we would fall on the higher end of that, maybe between 80 to 100,000 per month, but it could be more. It could be more if you're going out to eat. It could be more if you're grabbing more snacks, more drinks, more, what have you. But I always find that I'm hard pressed to walk in and out of the grocery store without spending at least $100. And that's sometimes only if I'm like grabbing enough for one meal and a couple of extras. So food prices add up very fast in Iceland. This is going to be drastically different as a tourist. So if you're eating out for every meal, those prices are a lot higher. For those that are going super cheap and trying to stay to a budget, then you can think about like grabbing gas station hot dogs or sandwiches, which can be like anywhere from 500 to 700 Icelandic krona. And then all the way up to like splurging on a really nice meal at a restaurant can be anywhere from 5,000 Icelandic krona to 10,000. Definitely a wide range of prices. Speaking of which, if you're planning a trip to Iceland and you're wondering what are these average prices with a breakdown, as well as some money saving tips and how to plan the best trip ever to Iceland, make sure to check out my guidebooks and maps, which I've linked in the description below. They will literally tell you everything you need from start to finish for your trip planning to have the best trip ever in Iceland. All right, moving on to the next point, which is transportation. Remember, this is the cost of living in Iceland, so I'm not gonna talk about things like group tours or rental cars. I mean, there's whole other videos that I have about that. These are the transportation costs while living in Iceland. Also keeping in mind that the transportation costs widely vary between what kind of vehicle you have, how far are you driving each day, is your vehicle take diesel or gasoline? So many different factors. Again, we'll give ranges and my experience as well. All right, so the first major expense would be your vehicle price. Now, when we moved to Iceland, we were not eligible yet for a loan for a car, which was a fun thing that we discovered when we moved. In the US, it's very, very common to get a loan for a vehicle and then pay that off every month. In Iceland, since we were not, like residents or citizens yet, we were not qualified for vehicle loans. So what we ended up having to do was just buy our vehicles outright. Yes, it was very fun if you're wondering. Also, yes, all we did was swipe our debit card at the dealership, were handed the keys and drove off. Such a funny experience. Okay, buying our vehicles outright meant that we were looking at obviously a used vehicle and something that was reliable, but like pretty bare bones. So my vehicle ended up being $8,000 US out of pocket. So a different approach would be for residents or citizens of Iceland, then they would probably be getting the loan, but the price for vehicles in Iceland is a lot. Anyway, moving on to fuel, which is shockingly and depressingly expensive in Iceland. When it all comes down to it, the price for fuel comes down to about $8 a gallon. So much, it's so much. It's shocking. What gives me comfort, which is complete ignorance, is like on the display at the gas station, it usually says like 2.85. And so I'm always like, oh, good. Yeah, that's not a big deal. No, that's the price per liter. So when you convert it, no, it's not fun. Anyway, the fuel expenses, again, will like vary between how far your commute is, if you're traveling a lot around the country, or if you're just kind of going back and forth to work, what have you. Another expense obviously is vehicle insurance. And so that also depends on the type of vehicle you have and the emissions that it creates. And so for me personally, that's about 16,000 krona per month. That's a lot. Why am I surprised? I'm still surprised. Okay. Public transportation, if I were to choose to use public transportation, which in my daily life, I don't need to. Like a single fare on a bus ticket is gonna be about 450 Icelandic krona. And then taxis get really, really expensive, which is like their base rate is around 500 to 700 Icelandic krona. And then on top of that is about 400 krona per kilometer. So in Iceland, I usually don't advise to take a taxi because the rates add up very quickly. The next major category I'm gonna lump together, and that is healthcare and education. And the reason for that is those expenses are lumped into the taxes that we pay in Iceland. So essentially free. I say that very loosely. And you'll find out why when I get to the taxes portion. All right, so Iceland has a comprehensive healthcare system. So residents are covered by their national health insurance. Obviously, there's times where this is not covered, like certain prescriptions and procedures and things like that. But in general, things like going to the clinic to get, checked out if you have strep throat, almost all pregnancy and birth related expenses or slim to none. And yes, if you were wondering, that is amazing. Within that category, education. So this is a little bit variable. Everything's been variable. Wow, Jeannie, super surprising. So this is variable depending on what age your child is. So for example, starting very, very young when, parents go back to work and their babies have to be in daycare. So that's gonna be the most expensive time to have care provided for your child. After that, it gets significantly cheaper. So daycare is around 80 to 100,000 Icelandic krona, and that price depends on if you have them in a private home center versus a more like a bigger daycare center, and also where you're located throughout the city. For preschool, you're thinking between 30,000 to 50,000 Icelandic krona. Again, varies depending on where you are. Once kids get into primary school and all through high school, that is completely free. That's part of the tax system, that's part of everything, unless you are like sending your kid to a private school or an international school, and then higher education is a nominal fee. As someone who went to higher education in the US, it's basically free. In my mind, it's free. Depends on like the program that you're taking and how long you'll be there for. But from what I understand, you have to pay the application fee to get in, and then after that, pretty much your university is covered. All right, so the other major expense in Iceland are taxes. So Iceland is under a progressive tax system, which means the more that you earn, the more that you pay the government. So this is completely variable and from person to person, depending on income. The income tax rate is between 20 to 50 or sometimes even more % of your income. So that's fun. Oh, okay, the joys of living in Iceland. Now, if you guys like this video, I guarantee you're gonna love when I toured you through my apartment, showed you all of the rooms and what it's like to actually live in Iceland. So check out that video that's popping up in the screen. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, happy planning.